Hey, it's Matt Roush,
And Mike Brennan.
and we're back with another segment of the N Squared TechCast. And joining us, even as we speak, right this
Literally
second,
as
is
we
our
speak.
very own
Yes.
infectious disease expert, epidemiologist.
Hey guys, how's everything going? Be careful of the cold, dry weather. COVID spreads faster in cold, dry weather. Your mucous membranes dry up a little bit, and then your immune systems are a little bit lower, and your reaction to COVID attacks is a little bit slower. So that's why colds go faster through the winter season than during.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yes. So the snow takes all the moisture out of the air. Then you'll be ready for it if you just keep your nose, your mucous membranes wet.
You know what I was hoping we could talk about, since it's like breaking news, are the CDC recommendations right now.
Yes, absolutely.
Particularly because everybody's tired of trying to teach their kids from home virtually. You know, they want their lives back, right? So how are they going to be able to do that?
Yeah. So, of course, what's interesting is these are guidelines. These aren't requirements. And so guidelines tend to be a little bit more political in my estimation. Requirements mean that the science really has spoken, and that these are really definitive ways of moving forward, and we have to use this to be, on the right side of science. Guidelines mean, take what you like and apply appropriately to your environment. So, what do you guys think of these guidelines? Let me get those up. I actually have a couple of slides to show you guys if you want. That might be helpful. But why don't I? Let's see here.
I've been reading about them over the weekend. I don't know if Matt's had a chance to catch up with his reading, but yeah, they're pretty general in nature. And the head of the CDC was on one of the shows that I watched this morning, so I was watching what she had to say.
Yes, and what did she have to say?
Well, again, their guidelines, it varies by what the contagion rate is in your area. It varies about how your school is set up, whether it's well ventilated, and just so many other stuff like that.
Yeah. So highly, a little bit variable.
Yes.
And here are some of the thoughts that I had about that. Let me share my screen here, and we'll take a look at these guidelines. So there are 6 guidelines. These are 5 of them, and it says wear a mask correctly. Now, the basis of our studies, there were 2 big studies that were done. One was out of Wisconsin, the other was out of North Carolina, and both of them found that in situations where you've got a fairly high rate of, oh, that's interesting.
Whoops. Oh, there we go. Okay.
Yeah. So where you have a fairly high rate of community transmission, and you send kids to school with a high rate of mask wearing, the school can, in fact, beat the general community spread level. So in North Carolina, they found that 32 people out of 32 people out of 100,000 spread when in school, and that when applied over the same period of time in the community, North Carolina found that 730 people actually got COVID. Now, what's wrong with that experiment? And the answer is, unless you're testing everybody all the time, you actually don't know who's got COVID. And the problem is that the level of asymptomatic rates in school children are much higher than the level of asymptomatic rates in the general population. And so even though you got a 32 versus 732 level of spread, it really wasn't a terribly well-controlled experiment. The other problem is the design of the experiment. Those school systems knew they were being watched. And whenever you have that, there's something called the Hawthorne effect. You guys heard about the Hawthorne effect?
No.
The Hawthorne effect indicates that people who are subjects in a test generally will try to respond and if they know about that test, they'll respond appropriately. So the Hawthorne test was a famous test in back in the day, where they allowed to check for lighting in manufacturing environments. And so they told everyone we're going to do some tests. We're going to test the lighting, see if it really improves. And they didn't say much more, but more than that. And the Hawthorne plant then, increased the lighting 10%, and productivity went up 4 or 5%, and then they increased it another 10%, and productivity went up another 4 or 5%. And they said, wow, it must be that light really makes a difference in the productivity of our people. And then someone said, why don't we turn down the lights? And so they turned down the lights, and productivity went up 10%.
Hmm.
And then they turned down the lights even more. They could hardly even see a thing anymore. And productivity still went up. And the idea is that when you know that you're a subject of a study, and you look at those results, then you can be biased as the subject. And in these cases, for example, in Wisconsin, they had a school mask wearing rate of 97%. So we know that school masking, when it's applied appropriately, does reduce the level of spread. They had a school spread of 1% versus a community spread of 7% in Wisconsin. And that was again, these were 10 to 15 school districts they were looking over, quite a large population. But the issue, frankly, in Wisconsin is they're pretty much out of control. And then you put the kids in a situation where they are in control. I mean, the state generally, they're not a great representative state in terms of levels of control of their virus. They have a high incidence, and a lot of the virus spreads into Michigan that we've seen on that southern Upper Peninsula. You can see those charts where Wisconsin's doing so badly that it actually spreads into the southern parts of the Upper Peninsula. And so, comparing a very poorly controlled community environment with a very well-controlled school environment also isn't going to be representative as you start to roll out the program nationwide. So we have, number one, the testing isn't very good. It's not terribly well controlled. But just think of a common sense. Does it make sense to send a whole bunch of kids back into a closed environment for long periods of time, talking, communicating among each other, with lots of COVID around? If I'm a teacher, and you can add 2 plus 2, you can figure out this isn't a good idea as far as COVID spread goes. The issue, as you said, Mike, is the fact that it's very political. And so, CDC doesn't want to say, hell no. They want to say, well, here's the data. You guys understand that if you have a community spread of X, that it's a dangerous situation. And that community spread of X was calculated at about 90% of the counties in the country have a level of COVID in their environment that's over X. So what they're really saying is, if you're one of the 10% of the school districts in the country that is lucky enough to have really controlled COVID generally, and you want to send your kids back to school wearing masks, staying 6 feet apart, washing your hands, really washing down and disinfecting the school every night, and using contact tracing to watch what's going on, then yeah, it probably is safe without a vaccine. That's what but they didn't finish the thought, which was, but if you don't have that, hell no. Mm-hmm. And that's the problem. That it's so political and so much push. And then what as the CDC epidemiology just does is they say, what's the cost and benefit? And that's, again, a very difficult thing to figure out, right? Because you know what the cost could be in terms of the COVID outbreak. The benefit is also pretty apparent. Kids are losing a year of school. They're very depressed. It's affecting them socially. It's affecting them developmentally. And the moms can't go back. I mean, I don't want to speak prejudicially here, but it's fundamentally women have been actually stripped from the workforce at unprecedented rates. I mean, we've lost 10 years of forward progress on the gender gap in the workplace because of COVID. There's so many more, fortunately, so many more women stay home to take care of the kids than men, that it really is hurting the gender and hurting their careers and hurting society being able to spend money and opening up the economy again. So they're trying to weigh that cost benefit. And as scientists, they can say, hell no, don't go back to school. But the societal costs are very hard to measure, and you're not sure whether they're temporary or permanent. The problem is that as COVID continues to be such a lengthy issue that we've got in our society, we thought that as you lengthen out these closed shutdowns, it is going to have permanent scarring effects. And so people are starting to say, gosh, it's getting to be too much now. It really is. We have to start pushing harder. And that's what they're trying to do. But the truth about the matter is that if you're a teacher and and right now 25% of you are at risk, at higher risk than normal for contracting a severe case of COVID and dying, I can understand why they're very hesitant to go back to school. Because basically these are guidelines. They're not requirements or final recommendations. They're not terribly scientifically well based. They're politically, they're driven largely by politics as far as the cost benefit goes. And they don't feel like the truth is, if we gave a damn, we'd say to all the teachers, you're first, you're first, go get your vaccine, take a week. All teachers have 1 week
Well,
to get vaccinated.
I
right?
thought they were supposed to be. I
They're
thought
they're
teachers
they're
were in
infected.
group 1B or something,
They're in 1B, but they're not getting the shots preferentially. And that's just wrong. That's just wrong.
Yeah.
If we really feel like as a society that school is that important, we've got that much pressure on the teachers to go back, we should take a time and set aside 8 million vaccines and vaccinate all this, because it's not just the teachers, right? It's the people who serve the lunches, it's the people who administer, people who drive the buses. All those guys are at risk. So my feeling about this as an epidemiologist and looking at looking at the data is we don't have the data to justify sending everyone back to school without vaccinating. Period.
Well, the other issue
with
too is even when they get through the wave of vaccines, the people below 16, I don't know where they're at, but they're like very last in line, right?
Yeah. No, we don't even. We can't even. We're not planning to vaccinate. So we give you a sense of this. We probably will have data on kids between 12 and 18 right around September, October. Well, we'll know the data at that point for 12 to 18-year-olds, which is good because high school students, need to move from classroom to classroom. I work with a lot of schools, and on a pro bono basis, and they don't want to work in pods. It's hard to keep high school kids in pods. You've got to actually let them go from class to class, walk the halls, and be social. And so that group we might have vaccines for in the fall. But then what you do is you move to the 6 to 12-year-olds, and after that you move to the 2 to 12-year-olds. After that you move to the 6 month to the 2-year-olds. And that won't be, those tests, those studies won't be done until 2022, middle of 2022. Yeah, so that's where we get the childhood and infant vaccine questions answered, and kind of 2 years from now. Yeah. So we got a ways to go before we can vaccinate the kids, and we've got to start. If we believe as a society that the teachers are critical, and this is really hindering our ability to get back on track as a society, then put your money where your mouth is. Vaccinate take time out. Stop vaccinating 65-year-olds and start vaccinating teachers. Right? I mean, it's that simple.
I know that you have briefed the Biden administration. I'm assuming you probably told them what you're telling us, right?
I can't really comment on what I talked about the Biden administration. I did have a point of view, and I expressed it to the person who the director, to pretty high level people in the administration. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm disappointed because I think that we can do better as a society here in creating priorities and moving things forward. In a responsible manner. And furthermore, those vaccines could be Pfizer vaccines, not Moderna vaccines, because Pfizer vaccines come on with full, come on 2 weeks faster. So if you want to get kids back to school faster, you give them Pfizer vaccines, right? I mean, there are a whole bunch of things we can start to do to really say we care about this.
Where do we stand on the Johnson & Johnson? Has that been approved for emergency use?
We think so. My timeline was just before March 1st. I think their summary data and FDA review data, they've submitted it last week. I think the summary data and the review data will be ready next week, or the following week, and at that point we'll know a lot more about what the data really says. Right now, they release data sort of to their stock shareholders, which isn't a great way to release data, but they want they wanted to get something out, so that's what they did. So we don't know all the answers. We know that overall, the comparative number that you want to look at is overall efficacy, and they're at around, as I recall, 62%.
Mm.
Versus 80 versus 95% for the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccine. But remember, that's only for one shot, and they have a test going on right now for the second shot. So you may be getting the first shot and then getting a booster later on to get up to the higher levels of immune response. So you can always possibly get a supplement. The issue we've got is that what you really want to look at is the decline in severe disease, right? That's the one you really want to look at. And with severe disease, because that's what killed you, is the severe disease. And then you're down with Johnson & Johnson 85%, with Pfizer 89%, and with Moderna 100%. So it gives you a sense of just how life-saving these vaccines are.
Yeah. So we're now into our third week of limited restaurant reopenings in Michigan. What do you think of that as a strategy, and how do you think that's going? Have you heard anything?
I have not. So we're watching the data. Things are looking good. Things are going down, which is great news. And people are being more careful, which is good. I mean, so we've learned some things. I had some other things on school guidelines. I wanted to show you. Here's the way people are acting right now. In the fall of 2020, this is what the school said, right? So 54% of them said they were going to go hybrid. 15% said they're going to be in person, and 31% said they were going to be remote. So 31%. There's a little bit of jitter in the data. That's why you get the not quite 100%. But you can get a sense that by the end of 2020, though, after we had that big peak in the fall, the number of hybrids went down to about a third. The in-person went down to less than 10%. The remotes went up. And so, in the real world, this was the plan, and actually execution, it became, as I said, about the hybrid went down to about 35%, remote went up to almost 50%, in-person went down to 10%. So, that's just what had to happen as a result of us, kind of taking off with the disease. I wanted to show you what we're worried about. Here, I don't know if you've heard about, this is what the epidemiologists are all worried about, right? We've had 3 waves, and each time the waves get bigger and bigger and bigger, and we come down, less and less and less, right? We don't quite hit the same baseline each time. So the question is, are we going to have a wave 4? And every time we have one of these waves, right, all the politicians and all the people who are interested in the economy open say basically, in 3 months everything's going to be great. In 3 months, things are going to look good, right? I mean, remember that we had President Trump who correctly thought it's a small attack, got a few people hurt, and give it 3 months and it'll disappear. And a lot of people thought that was right. In fact, the majority of people, when you talk to them each time, think that we're about 3 to 6 months away from controlling the virus. That's been true from day one. Right? And so every time we have an attack, wave 2, we said, we opened up a little early. Well, we've learned, we're going to close that down again, and then in 3 months, it should be really down to nothing. And then we had the big holiday outbreaks, and now we're saying, we got the vaccines, and in 3 months, should be good. So what do you guys think? In 3 months, is it all going to be good? 3 to 6 months, all good, or you think we're going to have a challenge? You can see, we got a choice here. What do you guys think?
Boy,
it's a toughie, isn't it?
Since we've been dealing with you since last April, I'm not sure what to think anymore.
I'm unbiased. I'm unbiased.
Yes. Well, the optimism is they're hoping to get everybody that needs a vaccine or wants a vaccine done sometime around midsummer or late summer.
That's right. If we go at our current rate, we're doing 1.65 vaccines a day. 1.65 million vaccines a day. At our current rate, we'll be done by August. Everyone will have double dose by August if we go at that rate. Now, what's nice is that Johnson & Johnson's coming out, going to add 100 million doses. We're going to have Novavax coming out, probably in about the May, June timeframe, 200 million doses. And we'll have AstraZeneca, another 100 million doses coming out in April. So now, all of a sudden, you got Boomtown as far as the vaccine goes, I think, right? We're gonna be in pretty good shape to probably even June, July timeframes. People who want a vaccine probably will have one. At least the first round.
Okay.
Second round, it'll be probably it'll probably, to get through everybody, it'll probably take through, if you're on Moderna, it'll take through mid-July. And if you're on Pfizer, it'll take to July 4th. And everyone who wants one can get one. Now, don't forget, there's going to be some pushback about, gosh, I don't feel comfortable yet, and so on, that we won't get everyone vaccinated, but people who want one will get it. So let's just say that, middle of July.
But the really important question is Mike going to be able to tailgate in Ann Arbor this fall? That's
the highest priority for me.
and
I
me
gotta
either
get
in
back in
Kalamazoo
that
or me
stadium.
either in Kalamazoo or East Lansing. And,
We got
Mike will
4
be in Ann
home
Arbor.
games in September. I've got to be able to.
So,
No, I mean,
September. You want to tailgate in September?
well, actually, a whole lot of other people do too. I mean, like 110,000 all want to get
110,000
together.
want to tailgate. You want to be close together. Well, are you willing to wear a mask?
Well, I am. I'm not sure about everybody else. So.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. So if you're willing to wear a mask,
Because you're outdoors.
and you're outdoors, right, and you've been vaccinated,
Yeah.
I think there's a 70% chance that things are going to be pretty good.
Oh, I like it. Okay.
Yeah.
But
Well,
I
Matt
think there's
wants to
also
get
a
up there
30% chance that it's not going to be
Yes.
quite ready for
We're going to
prime
get the
time.
red line there. Yeah, right. Okay.
And I don't
Gotcha.
think we're going to actually know that until about Halloween. You're going to be taking some risks about who you invite and how much you want to get, exposed, because we're going to be watching these variants, and these variants are a little bit tricky. We don't know yet whether they're escaping the vaccine. And the thing that worries me most is that we're starting to see suggested evidence that our current, even without selective pressure, these variants are really starting to be highly plastic right in the binding domain of the ACE2 receptor. And that, you can see that the red in the upper left-hand corner, you can see the red, all these red numbers, all those red blue numbers. Those are shifts that we have from the Wuhan virus to which we created our vaccine to the new variants. And we're not seeing 1 or 2, we're seeing 20, 25.
Oh boy.
And this is just the start of it, right? We've only been doing this we only had this going for a few months, and we're really watching this closely. So it's moving fast, and you can see what's happening. The UK, what's happening is these new variants are what they call more fit. And that means they reproduce better. And the reason they reproduce better is twofold. The first reason is because they have a much better binding affinity to that ACE2 receptor, about 85% higher rate of receptivity and binding coefficient than the original antigen that we created. And they also cause a lot more viral shedding. They increase viral shedding by about 70%. So all of a sudden, every time you cough, you're spewing out more of this stuff if you're sick, and it's stickier to the person who is susceptible. And you put those two together, and it's about 56% more contagious, or the R value is 56% higher than the original Wuhan virus against which we originally created this piece. In South Africa, that's just for the B117 variant. It has a 10-day doubling rate. So right now it's 7% of California. As I said, we were going to go 7, 14, 28, right? So by the time you get 4 or 5 weeks out, it'll become the dominant strain. And it's 25%, 30 to 40%. Well, it's between 20 and 30% more deadly. So its infection fatality rate, the IFR, is 25% higher than the original Wuhan virus, to which we created our vaccine, right? South Africa, we actually looked at the clinical trials, and 20 to 50% escape levels were observed in the South African variant. It was so high against the AstraZeneca vaccine that they had to say that it really wasn't terribly effective, and they probably won't use it in South Africa because it wasn't effective. And Brazil, they had CanSino was doing tests in Brazil and Malaysia, And when they added the Brazilian data to the CanSino data, the effectiveness went down from 75% to 50%.
Hmm.
Right? That and there was about equal numbers of trial patients in both those trials. So you get a sense of just how powerful these new variants are. And here they are. You can see in the lower left-hand corner, we finally got the Pfizer finally released its data. We already had this data, which I showed you before, on how Moderna does. And Pfizer did about the same. It's a 4 to 6-fold reduction in overall titer levels on the lower left-hand corner. You can see the neutralizing antibodies. That's what we're interested in. If we get this thing, will have my antibodies neutralized as a result of me having the vaccine. And you can see it's a 4 to 6 rate lower rate of neutralization. The most damning thing we've got is what's happened in Manaus, which is the third largest. It's the third largest city in Brazil. It's part of Amazonas. And basically, Manaus, remember Brazil, their president went through and said, let's let the virus run its course. It was early days, remember, and they really couldn't afford to test everybody. He said, let's think we're a young population, we can handle this. Let's just let the thing run its course. And so people were watching. Let's run its course. And so in Manaus, 78% of the people got infected with the original Wuhan virus. 78%. That's a high level, right? And that's about what you think you're going to need for herd immunity if you're getting protected from being infected. That's one of the things we're counting on, right? You get infected once, you have the immunity just like you would as a vaccine. Well, what happened was that wasn't the original Wuhan virus. Now, 9 months pass by, the new variant comes through, and guess what happens? You can see here's the bump, the red bump in April. See how they go through the bump? 78% of people infected. 9 months later, they went through, and it's like you're hitting a virgin population, completely susceptible population. Everyone got COVID again. That was really tough to watch, right? Because what this virus thrives on is susceptible population. So if you can find a susceptible population to the new variant, it can reproduce, it can cause more mutation, it can find the next population to go forward with. We thought we'd be protected if we got sick once. That's enough, right? Not true. Get sick once, variants come, get sick again. That was really devastating to see. So that's why we're sort of saying it's a 70-30 chance, right? It's a 70% chance the vaccines will hold. There's a 30% chance that we're going to have enough variants in there. There's going to be enough mixing, enough continued reproduction, enough non-mask wearing, enough global spread that we'll have such a big gene pool that they're going to find a way around our vaccine. And that's sort of the why we're saying this. And so here is the scenarios. We ran the scenarios, and you can see that we ran that there. What we tried to do was we had a lower bound. Lower bound is if we have a well-functioning vaccine, that's the purple line, that's completely sanitizing, very durable, and we roll it out perfectly. So that's the lower bound, right? And you can see it goes up and then comes down, never comes back up again. We solve the problem. Then we have the upper bound, which is no vaccines. And we decide it doesn't work for some reason, we can't do anything. Between those lines is reality, right? Either you have lots of great vaccines, you have no vaccines. And so you can see the blue line. And that's what we think is most likely. And you can see that we're down to around 80,000 deaths per year ultimately. If we have a very effective vaccine, it comes a little bit like the flu, 70% chance of that. But there's a 30% chance, and we'll know around Halloween whether this is the case, that we are going to actually bump back up again. And we'll start to go up and down and continue this pathway. So this is what that's sort of the best and worst scenarios, and this is what it looks like in more detail. Herd immunity occurs. This is the best scenario. Herd immunity occurs, comes down. You can see that it really by kind of 2022, we're in pretty good shape, right? We have the 70 to 80,000 deaths a year, and that gives you a sense of here are some of the assumptions that we use for this, and you can see it goes up and then comes down again. But it wasn't very hard to get to this kind of a scenario. All you had to do was say immunity isn't very long of duration. The vaccine refusal rate or the vaccine efficacy rate is 50%. We're probably going to run at 70, so it doesn't take that much, right? The second dose is only 50%. Today, that's about what our second dose compliance is for most vaccines for adults. And that we start to not mask as much as we used to, clean as much as we used to. We go back to thinking that we're safe now, so we can let off the shield. And if you do that, you can see what happens. You come up, and then in 2022, you've got a huge peak. In 2023, another big peak of these variants coming back because you've broken through the herd immunity, and your vaccines and your defenses are not effective. So that's what that looks like, and that's what happens. You have breakthroughs of an outbreak breakthroughs that occur as it wanes. So I know that we're getting late. I'm
That's
sorry.
right. I asked Dave for a few more minutes because I know. So we got about 5 more minutes.
Beautiful. Well, I've got. So now the question starts to become, right? The question starts to become, how do you manage in a situation where you're not really sure whether or not you're safe or not? Is herd immunity working, or isn't it working? And I have some thoughts on that. I need to pull up a slightly different slide. See if it's this one.
While you're doing that, I know we've asked this question before. Have we been able to ascertain whether ethnicity or geography play into this? Because we seem to have all these various strains around the world.
That is a great question. We are looking at that all the time, and it's a really important question.
Right, and let's forget Mike's tailgating scenario. It's Punchki Day tomorrow, Fred. Fred, what should we be doing?
Getting delivery.
That's right. It's fabulous. Go out there, order your favorite one, have it delivered, or pick it up at
and then take it back home and eat it.
Go and have a great.
Fine.
I love it. Excellent question.
You're affecting David's diet now, Fred. So.
Well, I mean, and really, like none of the bars in Hamtramck are doing like tents and bars and all that stuff this year. It's very low key. So I was being mostly sarcastic.
Okay.
Yeah. Well,
Dave, sarcastic? I find that hard to believe, right?
So unlike me.
Oh.
All right, so remember, we only got about 5 minutes of overtime here.
Very quickly, what's happening is you're trying to navigate between a pre-herd and navigating pre-herd immunity, right? And so some groups and communities are going to be quite protected, and others will be inadequately protected. And so what you're going to have to do is actually start to monitor how safe or not safe you are, and we call this bubble management. And so you'll have to have different levels of protection, different levels of thought about how you want to keep yourself safe, whether you're at home, at work, in the community level, state level, national level, or if you travel internationally a lot. You'll have to have different. You'll be expected to have different levels of control. And if you're traveling, you're going to have vaccine. You're going to have a vaccine ID card. You're going to have tests regularly, right? If you're largely at home or an elderly and working remotely, probably less so. But you're going to start to create communities around you that have known levels of protection or not. And so we're going to have to watch for outbreaks, right? Because as soon as the outbreaks start to occur, you want to snuff them out real fast. Otherwise, they can start to spread across. Because as the prevalence of the virus comes, you can start to see that here's where adequate protection is. That gets more and more and more against the protected and unprotected. It's going to overwhelm you, and that's what the picture on the right hand side shows. Left hand side protected, right hand side you've got overwhelmed, and so you're going to have to manage that to make sure that your family and the communities are working that. And it turns out the NFL had experience with this, and they found out that if you are trying to do herd immunity protections, that it's more than just about staying 6 feet away and wearing a mask. You actually have to kind of figure out how long you're been exposed, how close you got to people, because it turns out that the amount of virus you get is cumulative. So if you're in a place for 2 or 3 hours, and you get a little sniff at minute 7.5, and you get another little sniff at minute number 230. Those things can combine, and you have enough of a load that it could overwhelm your immune system, and then you'll get COVID. So you got to watch the cumulative effects over time, and we're starting to develop tools that do this. You can get a sense that if you're doing things at home and yourself, you want to do antigen testing, you want to do serology testing, you want to do vaccine boosters, You want to be aware of dangers, sort of general level of COVID. But if you start to get down to the work venues, what they'll do is they'll start to test you at work, and then the communities will start to pull that data together to figure out what the general level of immunity is, what the general level of virus is, because you've got all these new points of information. You'll be able to understand that better. Hopefully we'll start to communicate that better, because right now it's not going as well as it should. And then we roll all those up to what they call jurisdictional level, and to a state level, and then to the national level, and finally to the international level, and then we start reporting. And what's interesting is we actually had this with measles outbreak in Michigan. We've had a lot of really good control for a long time, and then, but you can see that patient care varies in little patches, right, across the United States, and you can see the level of access to primary care. If you look at Oakland County, it's pretty good. It's a dark blue, right? So let's look a little bit closer. At the county level, it was a dark blue. Congressional district level, still good. School district level, still pretty good, but you're starting to see a little bit of breakthrough, right? You're starting to get down to 40% down there in the southern part of Oakland County. Then you start looking by census, and you start to see, holy cow, we don't have very good control. I mean, we don't, there's a lot of white in there, but there sure is a lot of light green and yellow, which brings you down to 20 to 30%. And when you get to the block groups, all of a sudden you realize you don't really know a lot about where the control is, and it's generally not as good as you thought in some areas. It's quite a patchwork, and so you're going to be moving in and out of these areas over time. And sure enough, we had the measles outbreak because we didn't understand that, in spite of the fact that the county was really well protected, when you start to get to individual little squares within that county, you can have a lot of non-protection. And when you're in those areas of non-protection and you bring in the virus to one person, you've got a super spreader event in one person, like you did in South Dakota, unfortunately this year with the motorcycle events, the Harley Davidson events. Sure enough, it explodes. That's what happened.
Sturgis, excuse me. Yes.
Sturgis. I love Sturgis. And every year my son goes to Sturgis, and he has a great time. And this year I was able to convince him not to go, but he was so bummed at me. He still is hard to speak to because he loved it, but it was just like, just 1 year, give me a favor. He said, okay, he's back. But yeah, I mean, that was a tough one, but it was pretty predictable, sadly. So anyway, what's going to happen is you're going to start to work on these bubbles. You're going to have to start, you'll have better control with technology. We'll talk about this maybe next time a little bit, and you'll be able to understand whether your group is more susceptible, less susceptible. Maybe you want to join a group of.
Yeah, I want to talk about that, because I'm all about the bubbles. We've got a little family bubble in my family, and I'd like to know if I could interact with other bubbles if they've also been careful.
That's right.
So tiny bubbles will be next week, right?
We'll talk about that next week. That sounds like a plan.
In the wine. Okay.
Oh.
You don't want to hear me sing. All right. Well, we're out of time. Dave has been gracious enough to extend you overtime here today. So, but let's get you back next week to talk about your bubbles here. And,
we will. We'll talk a little about the economy. How does that sound? We'll be able to see more about what Joe Biden's planning for that.
Sounds great.
Additional four-year students love Lawrence Technological University's thriving campus life. But LTU has always met non-traditional students' needs too. Lawrence Tech offers over 100 degree and certificate programs that can get adult students started or back on track. And most of our classes are conveniently offered evenings at our beautiful Southfield campus or online, so you can balance your social, family, and work life even while you power up your career. Lawrence Tech, where Blue Devils dare.